is already looking at it, talking about it. They put a group of gentlemen together that are beginning to discuss it and work on it. And Cliff wanted to come and talk to the Quorum Court about what kind of support we might be able to offer them. So,
thank you. Well, as most of you are aware, this tax was originally passed in 2003, and since then it has funded almost every significant manufacturing expansion or new location that has happened in the county, anywhere in the county, Manila, Blytheville, or Osceola. So my board at their last meeting instructed me to come to you and ask if the Quorum Court through the P&D committee would this month in March pass a resolution in favor of the extension of the tax. We can pass that resolution say in August, which is more or less where their thinking is now, in an August special election. It won't actually kick in until the present tax expires in June of 23, but then it would run through June of 33. And whatever happens in that extended period of time, I can pretty well guarantee I won't be here to see it through. So, but these are some of the reasons. And after we do this, then I'll be happy to answer any questions, which I feel like there are some. So, Tamika, if we could. Okay, this first passed in 2003 with a 10-year sunset, and that's what we anticipate doing again. It was renewed again in 2013. In 2003, it only passed by 65 votes, but in 2013, it passed by several hundred votes as the people saw that many of the original objections had not, in fact, been valid. Okay? It generates roughly $3.3 million a year. And what do we do with the money? Y'all know what we do with the money. We buy land, we do infrastructure, we built roads, railroads, extended gas lines, extended electric lines. We put in water treatment plants for industry. One of our biggest saves that we had was when Kagome, a Japanese company, bought Osceola Foods about 14 years ago, and they bought it with full intent of moving it to the East Coast. But we put up, I think, $2 million, and the state put up $4 million, and we built them a new water treatment plant where they could put their used water into the Osceola system, and they stayed, and they still employ about 230 to 240 people. And then we've also used it for wage reimbursement of new employees under the work program. In about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, we shifted, and we don't, we now tie the incentive amount directly to the number of jobs held by Mississippi County residents. We don't, and then we do 50% of that for residents of the Boot Hill. Now that's at the discretion of this Quorum Court. If y'all if you instruct me not to negotiate for Boot Hill jobs, then I won't. But the thinking there is that members of the Boot Hill have always, for 100 years or more, shopped in Blytheville, and that therefore they help pay the sales tax. And in fact, we couldn't keep all these industries running if we didn't have that workforce available. We've created over 4,100 jobs, of which over 3,600 are still in existence today. Those 3,600 jobs create an annual payroll of $130 million a year. Is there a multiplier effect? Of course there is. Multipliers get kind of, they can be overdone or underdone, but the general standard that is used in manufacturing jobs are that the money will turn over 5 times in a close geographic proximity to the place that it's earned. So over that time period, that means we've invested over $40 million in co-invested with industry, and that also includes what the county pays to the Great River Foundation to actually do the economic development each year. That $40 million has brought in matching state and federal grants of over $300 million. And the payroll over that same time period would be $2 billion. So essentially, we've invested a little over $40 billion to get a payroll of over $2 billion, which is a 5,000% return on investment. Now, another thing that has become important, I think, in both justifying, defending, and believing in the validity of the tax is the amount of property tax that we now collect. It is about 14 years ago, 15 years ago, the state legislature made it impossible to forgive more than 65% of an industry's property tax. Up until then, almost every municipality or county in Arkansas had been forgiven 100% of the property tax, under the belief that if you get the factory, the people will come. There'll be homes, there'll be autos, there'll be plenty of property tax to tax. But of course that didn't really work out exactly as planned. And the legislature, and they did us all a great favor, because now, for instance, Big River Steel by itself, because it was a $1.3 billion investment, it pays more property tax in than every single acre of ground in Mississippi County. In other words, industry now pays about $9 million, or 60% of all the taxes paid. And everything else, every commercial business, every house, every lawnmower, every washing machine, every bass boat pays the other 40%, or $6 million. And of course, many of those households, in fact, the majority of those households would not be here if we didn't have a vibrant industrial base. And what does that pay for? Well, it, as y'all well know, it pays for everything: roads, schools, the sheriff's department, the landfill, and every other proper function of county or city government. And this is an example of really how our the focus that we've had, and it's not been something we didn't decide to go out and start, that we need to start recruiting plants that only invest over almost $1 billion at a time, but we have been fortunate in that is what has happened. So in 2020, there was over $1.6 billion in new capital investment in Mississippi County, and this is in a year where most counties in Arkansas saw no increase in capital investment because businesses were largely shut down. But Nucor invested $750 million in their expansions, and Big River Steel invested $750 billion in theirs. That's $1.5 billion, and then Atlas invested another $150 million, just $150 million, in doubling the size of their plant. So if you take that $1.6 billion, decide what the property, do it. I mean, we gave the 65% Act 9 bonds, 65% property tax forgiveness, but that still will bring in another $3 million when that comes on the payroll, either in this year or next year. So that's basically what my board asked themselves is, where would we be if we had not done this almost 20 years ago? I mean, if we hadn't won the Nucor expansion, those plants would now be 30 years old. And when a plant gets to be 30 years old in your community, you're in some jeopardy there because it's fully depreciated. It's not unusual in this time for a company to, once the plant has been depreciated, to just start the incentive war all over again. To say, okay, we can now move Arkansas. So what will you, why should we stay? Now in the new core expansion, the state answered the call, as did Mississippi County. And now that they've invested another $750 million, I think we can look forward to, several more decades of them being here and a strong part of our economy. We wouldn't have had without incentives. Without incentives, I really honestly cannot think of a single project that would have happened since 2001 if we had not been able to offer a monetary incentive, because no matter how perfectly we fit someone's desire of their idea of a perfect site, there's always somewhere else that's just as perfect. There'll always be at least one other site, normally two, that answer their needs as far as location, workforce, whatever they're looking for. Of course, the overwhelming thing they look for now is workforce and workforce training. And I will say that it's not really related to the Quorum Court that much, but that addition of the Allied Tech Center at ANC has been a tremendous help to me in recruiting and expansions. I don't know if any of you have ever been to West Memphis Community College. They have a beautiful training center there that the president got Governor Bill Clinton to make him a grant to build. And he built it, and it's beautiful. But unlike ANC, they never really set up to train that many people. It just wasn't that big a focus. So, but I can, on numerous occasions from Denso on, companies would come in and they would say, well, we like locating here, but can we get trained there? Now, that doesn't happen anymore. And it never happened after I would get them to the Chris Center, but it really is, it's been a huge help and is a real statement of the economic strength of the county. So under the current election laws, if the court, what we would like to ask the court to do is pass just a resolution in favor of extending the tax in March. And then in April, actually set an ordinance to have an election the second Tuesday in August. We can't do that in March because then the election would have to come in July. But in March, we could do it, and that would give us in April, we would have you can do it between 90 and 100 and 120 days. You can't go over 120 days, you can't do it before 90 days. And of course, this would depend, to be successful, it would take a suspension of the rules and to read it 3 times in April. So that concludes this presentation, and now I'd be happy to answer or discuss anything with any member that you would like to discuss.
If 80%, you're talking another 3 million added to the tax rolls because of what was invested in 2020.
Just in 2020.
80% of that goes to the schools.
Right.
I mean, look at what it's doing for our school system.
Right.
Mississippi County gets about 10% of it.
Right.
So you're talking, once all this investment hits the county tax rolls, it's going to increase our county portion $300,000 a year, every year.
And it's not over. I mean, we are in talks now with U.S. Steel is considering actually doubling the size of that mill again, which would be another $1.4 billion investment. So we've put ourselves in a very good position here with this. With the investments that the people have made since literally 2001. I know there have been some questions about could we expand the usage of the tax, and that's a battle I've been fighting for the last almost 20 years. 3 times I've gone with, once I went with Mayor Kennemore, once with Mayor Harrison, once by myself, to my colleagues on the Arkansas Economic Developers Association, which includes everyone like me all around the state, plus all the employees of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. And we have worked to bring 3 constitutional amendments before the people to loosen the restrictions that were previously in place as far as communities and municipalities doing something to help themselves. The Arkansas Constitution just didn't think that was a very good idea. It was extremely limited in what could be done. And it goes back into, the 1870s, and it was ancient history, but it was still governing what we were able to do. So we have made it much easier to respond effectively to the requirements that it's going to take to actually win a project. After talking to Judge Nelson and to Justice White, I have invited Shep Russell, who's the senior partner at the Friday firm in Little Rock, who has always been our guide in what we can do and what we shouldn't do, to come to the quorum court meeting in March, and he'll make it, if it suits the court, he'll make a short presentation and then be completely open for questions to that anybody might have on, why are there restrictions? What could we do to change them? I mean, we could, since we're not going to, it would be April, and therefore, if there was sufficient, really political will to make a change in that ordinance, it could be done. Now, I've talked to people about it, and some people feel that if we change something, it could lead to electoral disaster, that people would say, well, we know what it's been doing, and now they want to do something else. And, everybody's got a they, depending upon who them are. It could be those people up north, those people down south, those people across the lake, them. And, negativity can spread, as y'all are aware, faster than the speed of light. So that's a caution, I think, to be aware of. It's something the members of my board, we discussed at length. Was there something we could do to perhaps give ourselves more freedom in the recommendations we bring to the court? That was the primary fear that emerged from that, plus the fact that Mr. Russell says that in the end, we're not going to be able to do it anyway, because it's just going to be unconstitutional. And that's the real difficulty. If it was just a law, we could go to the senator and our representatives, and they could probably, get it changed a little bit for us. But it's, according to him, it's in the Constitution. And I know that the 3 times we've gotten more elbow room to work, we've had to get a constitutional amendment passed. I think that's all I know about that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this probably might be directed to some of the other justices that have been around longer. But isn't it a voluntary thing that we follow that particular the Arkansas guidelines for economic development? Didn't we voluntarily decide to do that as a court, and so that's why we're limited to those rules, because we voluntarily chose to follow those rules?
Well, we did choose to follow those rules. Now, whether or not we could not follow those rules, I don't think there is an enforcement branch of law enforcement. I don't think the state police would come after us. The auditors, might. The primary risk I've always been told that you run is if you spend money out of a dedicated account for something that it shouldn't be spent on, then you might have to pay it back out of the general account. And every time I've asked, I've gotten the same answer, and I've been asking for 20 years. Now, that doesn't mean that that necessarily would happen. You know, I mean, there have been 2 times where, you know, because of the strength of the political desire, we did something anyway. And, you know, whether it was absolutely, I mean, these aren't really matters of right and wrong. They're just matters of, you know, what does the Constitution say? And what happens if, in the view of, say, a taxpayer lawsuit, we've done something unconstitutional? That's where the hook is in the problem.
Right.
And that's why I thought that having Mr. Russell here, who is a noted Arkansas constitutional scholar, would be much better than just listening to me parrot back what he's told me over the phone, because I mean, all I know is what I've been told, and I don't have the depth of legal knowledge to really.
But I still say, Michael, as a senior member of the Quorum Court, the Quorum Court made a resolution to use those rules as our guidelines for the county, correct?
Correct.
Or not?
Our first limiting factor, the first limiting factor that we come across in how we can use the money is in the ordinance that we pass in calling for the election and in the wording of the referendum that the voters actually vote on. That's the first set of restrictions. We can't loosen up from that, but we can get a little tighter if we so desire. And we did choose to get a little tighter. Now, the first set of restrictions that we placed in that original referendum was pretty tight, economic development. And that's what Shep will kind of talk to us, I think, about when he comes in. Because there were so many gray areas, because we had a couple of gray areas that were pushed, the court at that time did choose to go with the state economic development guidelines, and we chose to do that. But they were only slightly more restrictive than what we were already following based on the wording of the ordinance and the referendum. Does that help?
It does, and that could be changed at any point in time. That's completely independent from
The ordinance
special
and the
election.
referendum?
Right, the rules
We've
that are
got a new
supposed
one
to follow.
coming up.
Right,
So-
so that's completely independent from the election.
Justice Jackson?
Okay, so on the ordinance, but you mentioned this earlier that people were nervous about changing the wording of the ordinance that's been in place for the last 2 votes. I mean, what would you change it to?
I don't know.
It's wide, it's.
Well, it's wide open, but let's say, okay, if there was a strong desire on the part of the court, say, to encourage a different type of investment, retail, would be the obvious one, then we could actually put that in our ordinance. Now, would that protect us from everything of the Constitution? I honestly don't know, but it would certainly give us if the people approved it, it would give us a very strong place to stand. This is what the people voted on. The court is the elected representatives of the people, and this is what we've decided to do.
But as it stands now, it doesn't say anything about any particular business. It just says, economic development, anything that will stimulate the economy. It seems like it is wide open.
Well, it is, and that's kind of the crux of the matter, is that at the end of the day, everything is economic development. There are passionate kindergarten teachers that could make a strong argument that we take the whole $3 million and put it into pre-K education, because over time that will raise all boats with a more educated workforce. And I can't really argue that they're incorrect.
No, I was just thinking, I can't imagine changing that ordinance. I don't know what you would, I see what you're saying about maybe listing like retail, but I don't know why, I can't imagine why you'd ever want to change what the people are actually voting on. It seems Seems
Agreed.
like it's working.
Agreed. That was my understanding, and that was the point that I was getting at, is it's not the ordinance that's binding us, it's the rules we're choosing to interpret.
Well,
That's
it's that
binding
and
us.
the constitutional, those things in the Constitution that keep us from doing that.
Can you give me an example of
Yeah.
like something that's in the Constitution?
Well, I can't quote the Constitution, that's why I'm getting Mr. Russell to come, but the story I was told by Bob Lamb, who was the first chairman of the Arkansas Chamber of Commerce, was that in the 1870s, when Arkansas was under federal authority, that railroad companies came through and sold, essentially, they said, if you'll, Harrison, Mountain Home, well, I wasn't here. OCO was barely here, and it flooded, it became an island every year when the river rose, but if you'll invest $5,000, which is probably $500,000 today in this railroad, we'll come through here. Otherwise, we're going over there. And a lot of counties and cities in Arkansas did that. And at the same time, Arkansas was writing a new constitution. And as they did, all those communities went broke because the railroad didn't come. The railroad didn't pay any dividends. And so the rules are in there that we can't do anything, but we can't do things like you can't loan money, for instance, which I've always thought was not correct. I mean, with the funds we've had, I think we should have been able to set up a revolving loan fund under, a set of professional people like the Grow America Fund or Capital One out of Little Rock, who has experience in making SBA loans, and our capital could be used to match part of the private person's capital. At least turn it over to professional bankers who could make the loans, collect the loan payments when due, and over time that fund could build up. And it would help us fill some of the gap that I think is there in the fact that banks aren't as aggressive to loaners to small business as they perhaps were a few decades ago. So that's a constitutional thing. We can't actually invest our money when we make a grant. We can't buy $14 million worth of Big River Steel. So that the people of the county could profit when U.S. Steel buys them out. That's also illegal. Now, as to the actual clauses that might keep us from doing some other job-creating thing, that's where the water that's where it really gets murky, and it gets murky politically too, because if you help when Lowe's came, Michael was on the board and the judge was on the court and the judge was on the court. The first response was, well, it's retail, you shouldn't do it. You ought not to do it. And that was the original decision, I think, of the P&D committee at the time. But then the phone started to ring and everybody wanted Lowe's. And Judge McGuire's phone rang and everybody on the court's floor rang, and next thing you knew, we did it. We made a grant along with the Blytheville Chamber, and Lowe's came. So, but those are decisions that are weighty enough that I can't take them on my own. And that's why I felt, and I don't think my board can take them. I think they're decisions that only the elected officials can actually take if we want to move away from a strict manufacturing approach to when we grant monetary co-investment or incentives. So that's why I think that Mr. Russell will be helpful.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with the ordinance though.
No.
But, and that was kind of the point that I was making is that I'm certainly not a opponent of the resolution to extend the tax by any means. But I'm not opponent to the way we've spent the money. I would just like to see us maybe find some ways to do what we've already been doing, while at the same time find some ways to use this economic development money to stop the bleeding of our population and address some quality of life issues and some other issues that I think are going to be a major problem in the next 10 to 20 years if we don't address. So and I just don't want to lock ourselves into not being able to do that by, if the wording needed to be changed.
Well, okay. What you're talking about, we did pass a resolution. I was on the court when this was passed, so it's been since 2012. And I don't remember what sparked it, but it was basically done to limit it to where it was economic development. It followed the state guidelines, and those state guidelines are very specific. They say it has to be a manufacturing job, and they say they have to do at least 75% of their business outside the state of Arkansas. As we heard in court the other day, resolution is a suggestion. It's not a law.
Okay.
It is something that we have accepted. That's what we have given Clif to operate off of. And as such, we follow it in general. Doesn't mean we can't change it, because we have to go by the original ordinance that was voted on by the people. So if it fits that ordinance, then yes, we could.
Right, and that's my
And
point. The
I'll
original
step out there and
ordinance.
say, but the question is, why would we want to as well as we've done so far? Now, I agree to some degree that I would like to see some retail, help there. In
Judge?
that if it was,
Yeah, I'd like to add something, just to clarify everything. This body here, the Quorum Court, is the one that decides where the money is spent. Cliff's position is that he is employed by a foundation that is made up of a group of individuals that volunteer their time with no pay. They act as an advisory board to the Planning and Development Committee, which interprets their advice, and then they move that to the Quorum Court. Cliff is not in a position to get in the way of the money or the foundation. It is entirely the Quorum Court. And there's a reason why it was set up like that, just like when he was talking about the phones start to ring. This kind of buffers some of the political ideas that go on and that may steer grants in a direction that it was never intended to go. So, like I said, the foundation has no authority. Cliff has no authority. It's just on an advisory position, and the Quorum Court is, like I said, it's 100%. And it's always been 100%. And you can do now with it today just like you want to, just like you could in the very beginning.
that's just what I was saying. The resolution is more for guidance for
Okay, it's for Cliff, so
Cliff
he
and the
knows the
foundation.
work
Yeah,
in
this is what we were wanting to narrow it to. It wasn't that we can't change it. It's that we wanted to narrow it so that hopefully they wouldn't get all the outside influence to do stuff.
So
And Cliff
then,
is kind of protecting us. I know there's been 3 county judges that have told Cliff, you'd better not let me do anything inappropriate.
That's exactly right.
gotcha. Well, again, we just go back to the fact that I just want to make sure before making that recommendation that it is, the ordinance itself is just a general economic development. That's how it's worded. And you're saying, yes, that is the case.
Well, the ordinance is,
It's
that's
yet to be
what the
written.
people vote on. I'm assuming that, and we shouldn't do that, but I'm assuming that our ordinance will be basically the same thing we
It was
voted on the
last
last 2
Yeah.
times.
Okay.
Now, the guidelines that we give them may change,
Okay.
but, we still need to operate. We actually took the exact guidelines that the state of Arkansas uses and just enacted them as a resolution for his guidance and for their guidance.
One of the reasons we did that, I mean, right now, there's, according to Kelly's last report, if we paid out all of the ED economic development contracts we've signed, there would only be $2.4 million left in that account. So, and that was one of the big criticisms or question marks. When we first brought this before the quorum court, there were justices who said, this is a specialized fund. You're going to raise $30 million over the next 10 years, and it's going to be sitting in a fund that we can't touch. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, we were able to co-invest, the jobs were created, the capital was invested in Mississippi County. So we're really not running very much ahead. I mean, actually, if 2020 hadn't essentially been a year where nobody went forward with an expansion that hadn't already been planned and contracted for, we wouldn't have accumulated that much. We would actually probably be at a negative now and just having to hold fast to hope we got enough money in the account before the tax ran out to fulfill our obligations, or unless we know that the people want to extend it. Because if they want to extend it, then, you know, we have breathing room.
I just have a question, just when you said that, this made me think about this. So there are some industry that we know is going to take several years for them to use, or to, I guess, to create the number of jobs and use all of the money that
Right.
we have incentivized them. If the tax were to pass, is there not a way that, could we do that on maybe more of a year, like a year end or a year beginning or something, to where you don't have all that money tied up all at once?
Well, what,
Is
like,
that, do you know, am I making,
well, I think so. We have those contracts with, Nucor, Big River Steel, and Atlas, and they go on a year-by-year thing. So they gave us a baseline. This is how many people we have for Mississippi County, and we agreed what we would vote per job incentive. And every year they give me a certified, this is how many people we have now in Mississippi County, and this is how many people from the Boot Hill. And if it, of course, if it goes backwards, we don't owe them anything until they get back to their all-time high, whatever that was. So if they have a dip, we don't pay while they're coming out of the dip, only when they pass the previous peak. But they have 5 years.
okay,
That was
that's
my
what I
question.
So, you see what I was asking, so, I know we do it on a yearly basis, we pay them on a yearly basis, but it ties up that money for possibly 5 years.
Well, that's right.
is
And
there
I don't
any-
know, you know, we've always given the 5 years. I mean, even on the first project we did, which was Denso, and was done without county money because the tax hadn't passed, but it was done with Osceola money. And we've really followed that same blueprint ever since. I mean, with Denso, we hadn't restricted it to Mississippi County residents. So the city of Osceola just bought the land and did the groundwork and all that, ran the new electric lines with their own money. But then we got a report each year until they hit the 500 people. And as it turned out, they fall in that pay scale where we don't have to worry. All the employees are going to be Mississippi County people anyway. It's only those real high-paying jobs at the steel mills where the employees don't come
No,
from
I'm
Mississippi
not
County.
necessarily suggesting we do it, I was just curious, I wasn't real clear on.
Well,
how
it does
that
make
plays
it a
out.
little awkward, you know, as far as the accounting, but, I mean, Kelly's got a good system for keeping up with it. And, you know, there have been companies that said we were coming and we signed a contract and then they said we're not. And, you know, we just took, as long as no money had been expended, we just took them off the
And
account.
Right.
Justice Jackson, going back to the same thing I said, you also have the capability of being at the table when before those contracts are let.
No, that's right, I mean, yes.
And if you want any changes, I mean, they can be made.
No,
Okay.
that's right, I mean, you're right.
So let me make sure I understand that to follow up. So when those contracts are awarded, the amount of money is allocated to that project. But if they don't meet that number of jobs within that 5-year time period, then that money that was allocated goes back into the fund that can be used again,
Yes.
correct? But it's basically on hold for 5 years until
Right.
it's expended.
That's
Or
right.
We
expired.
just did that.
Okay,
Yeah,
We just did that.
yeah.
okay.
Basically, you could have a company decide, say they were gonna come in, they were gonna hire 100 people, and they hire them all from Crittenden and Craighead County,
Right.
and we wouldn't be out of dime.
Right.
Right,
But the
okay.
money would just,
But the money would sit there for 5 years in case people
Okay.
left and we hired from Mississippi County or the Boonville.
Okay.
Your question is almost a question for legislative audit too. It's more of an accounting issue
yeah, that's,
and a commitment issue. We'd want to involve them if we were gonna make very many big changes like that.
well, and like I said, not necessarily even saying I would want to change that. I mean, it is very simple the way it's set up. But I also know in situations like this, you know, you do want to have enough money available, so if you have a big company that wants to come, you have enough money in the, you know, available to commit it. And if all your money's tied up, well, then it's kind of tough.
Well, just like,
It's gonna-
and I'll go back and give you a good example. When we did Big River Steel, we knew that we had the tax money coming in. We didn't have it all at that time. We committed a lot of it that we would have to collect.
Oh, I see, so you,
So, you know,
Okay,
but
gotcha.
we caught up and we have surpassed that, so.
14.5
so what you're saying,
million.
so right now you could commit out to, what is it, 23?
23.
Okay,
Even though we don't have the money.
even though we don't have the money. Okay,
Correct.
that makes a
Half
little
of
bit.
23, I think.
Okay, that's,
Right.
The first half would
And
be,
if we
Right.
renew it, then it'll go to 33.
okay,
that makes
more
another-
sense to me,
If we
okay.
had another
Okay.
14.5 million for another Big River Steel or something like that, then we could commit it out to
Well,
that
yeah.
point, but we can't commit it further because we can't guarantee it'll pass.
That makes sense, and that makes me feel a little bit better about how much we have committed. Now, I'm not on the committee, I'm 100% behind the resolution to move forward. I think it's, as I've shared with several of you, I mean, I have numbers of other ways that it's helped, economic growth in the county. I think it's been really beneficial. One thing I would like to see maybe as we move forward, I know we did the TADZO study and they brought back a lot of ideas. If maybe we could use that study more of a guideline.
Well, we certainly could. I mean, on the whole, on the entire question of quality of life, I mean, that's obviously an issue in Mississippi County. I mean, I live in downtown Osceola. I'm perfectly aware of the issue. So it's, and there again, it will be up to the court to set the guidelines and to instruct me in how they would like me to proceed and the foundation I work for, and then we'll proceed that way, whether it's because everything, whether it's an industrial project or some other type of project, everything is just a project. And the court has to decide the parameters that they would use because, and y'all are all smart people, you know that a lot of things that appear really tempting going in, the second step is one where you hit the quicksand, and that's why, as Justice Ash said, that's why we passed that inhibiting resolution. We were getting flooded. People that were I'm gonna set up a lawnmower business and I'm gonna have 5 people and, and all of a sudden it was just out of control.
No, and I've
Understood.
always said, as a new person on the court, I've always appreciated that resolution because it has made it very clear,
Mhm.
where and how the money can be spent, no doubt about it. But with that being said, I do think the flip side of that coin is, when we were doing this tax 10 years ago, we thought we create we create the jobs, the people will come, and we did half of it. You know what I'm saying?
That's
We got
right.
half of it. I mean, we've got plenty of jobs. We need some.
And one of the other reasons we created that is almost everything we develop, every business that we have incentivized, we did not actually give them money to hire employees. We've done infrastructure work. You used a good example where we put in the water treatment facility.
Right.
That's not something they can pick up and take with them. It's something that stays with the county. When we did the
Manila.
Big River Steel, we purchased land.
Right.
We still actually own that land until that
No,
commitment
I
is
think
fulfilled.
even with Manila, I
So,
think that's a great way to.
That's the problem. If you want to go into retail, you've got to get some way that we keep something there. You know, it's not, we're just giving them money to,
Personally,
Well, start the business.
I would not, I mean, I would not want to go into retail. I wouldn't go down that path. That's-
I wouldn't either, but that's not the point. You know, infrastructure investments to help bring
Right.
things in, extending water
That's the
lines,
point,
extending
right.
gas lines,
Right.
creating better lighting situations, things of that nature that help everyone who is in that area and is going to build on. That's the kind of things we need to look at if we were even talking about retail.
I agree, I totally agree with that. I'm not,
It's
certainly
not.
not suggesting that we give out money to buy inventory for people. That is
No,
definitely
that's-
not what I was suggesting at
You know,
all. I agree with
because
you.
I know we bought machinery for several places. I think at ART, we own some equipment out there, or
The
did.
state, all our money went into repairing
Right,
the building.
right.
Okay,
I'm-
So they're still-
So that's infrastructure.
Right.
That's
Right,
not,
yeah,
we didn't just hand them X amount of dollars to our
Right.
employees.
right,
Right.
right,
We said, we'll fix your building so you can hire the employees to work in it.
right.
No, and
No,
I think that's
agree.
a good, I mean, it's smart. I
That's,
mean,
that's the difference. We're not talking about, I don't wanna see us change from a whole lot from that resolution simply because I think it's a very good thing. I think if we bring the jobs here that people will come, not necessarily still build jobs because they're so well paying that people can afford to drive. But we need to look at, we own 7.5 acres on the south entrance. If we want to get someone to develop that, to put in better restaurants, to do things like that, we need to look at putting some good water lines out there, sewer lines, and light them. That's the kind of infrastructure investment I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything else.
I agree. So where is the right place to begin having those kind of conversations? At Greta's board? I mean, with Greta? That's where that would be the right place to have that, Judge?
No, it'd be this.
Right.
planning
Within this
commission.
committee or within this committee?
Within this court.
The
Okay.
foundation is just an advisory board.
Okay,
They bring us projects to fund.
okay,
You know, and they might, not saying you should do it, Cliff, but they're talking to Cracker Barrel. And Cracker Barrel says, well, I need land, and I need sewer, water, and light. That might be something we would look at.
right, okay.
Tamika's got something to add on the updating the TADZO study that
I
we,
just wanted to really quickly, as far as TADZO, we have been working to implement that study as much as we can. We do have a website coming up, cottontosteel.com. It'll be up by April the 1st. And we also have on that punch list was a certified site, and we have got a site certified recently, and also been a community competitive initiative awarded that award as well. So all that would be coming out soon. So we have been doing what we can as far as the TADZO.
and I think we need to make more of that public.
The website's gonna look really great, and it's supposed to go live the 1st of April.
What did you say that website was?
Cottontosteel.com.
Cotton to Steel, okay.
Have you got your badge?
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't have the badge, but I can pull the website up really quick.
Okay. It's a neat logo, and it does prompt a lot of questions. And as to the thing we were just discussing, I was contacted by an attorney yesterday. I haven't even had a chance to talk to the judge or Justice White about it yet, but an attorney from Jonesboro who represents a group of clients that is interested in the property that the city owns, that the county owns, where we were going to put the new courthouse
That's great.
for retail.
That's great.
So that's something, if it's the sense of the committee, to pursue, or, that's probably a almost made-to-order project to start this discussion. Because whether the Constitution prohibits us from doing that with the economic development money or not, that wasn't purchased with economic development money.
Oh, that's right.
That's right, okay. So, at this point, right now, what you need from this committee is a motion for the resolution to move to the full court, correct?
Right, a resolution supporting the renewal of the
Okay.
tax.
So, unless anyone else has anything else to say, I will go ahead and make that motion that we move to the full court to support renewing that tax.
Just a resolution in support of the renewal process of the economic development
Yes.
sales tax. Cliff, did you have somebody that was gonna prepare a resolution like that, or do we need to talk to our county attorney? or-
Well, Mr. Russell has prepared it the
That's what I
last two
thought.
times, and he'll give us the
The
resolution.
resolution of support that we can pass at our.
Well, not of support, I really,
Now, he's gonna do the ordinance, isn't he? for
he'll do
payment?
the ordinance.
What about the resolution next?
No, he.
So we need to do that ourselves.
Right.
Judge, can you
Sure,
help
we
with
can do
that?
I second.
Got a motion and a second. This is the beginning of a process, guys, as far as from the court standpoint. This isn't the end, it's just barely the beginning of a months-long process. This is the beginning discussion of many discussions. So maybe it's kind of sparked some ideas on everybody, particularly in regards to Shep coming. Have you and the judge, have y'all gotten a date for Shep to
The,
come?
the next meeting.
Next regular meeting, Judge, is, Molly, are you gonna be able to be here?
I will not be here.
Maybe you could prepare some questions for us. I hate that you're not gonna be here, because I know you have great interest.
And we can set up some telephone equipment if you want to participate that way.
Or he'll be happy, any justice, I can set up a phone appointment with, I mean, he's a very busy person, but I think he's probably written it into law, half the laws that the legislature has adopted in the last 4 or 5 sessions, so, but, he's always taken a pride in the work he's done here in Mississippi County and the use we have made of that, so I think he would be happy to talk to any justice or group of justices by phone at any time, and I'd be happy to set up that appointment.
I'm gonna step back a little bit to the cash flow problem that we were talking about, or the issue with the cash flow. If this was a longer term rather than the 10 years, and Cliff, you're gonna have to help me here or add in on it, that we could actually issue bonds backed by that money, is that correct?
That's correct, Judge. That was one, in the last constitutional amendment, it gave us 2 freedoms. The first was that we can now just reimburse companies for
Oh, that's right. I remember
money.
that.
I mean, let's say we make an agreement and they say, okay, we're gonna hire 100 people and we're gonna incentivize that at $10,000 a person, that's $1 million. So they come and tell us in a year or 2 or 3 that they've hired the 100 people, they show us the proof of that. Then they can just show us the check, cancel check, where they paid for the equipment and the invoice for the equipment. And generally I get them to show me the piece of equipment, and then we ask for that it be approved. It keeps us from having to, it actually helps us in that otherwise we had to run everything through the county bid process, which was inhibiting us from insisting that they create the jobs and then we'll incentivize them. We were really kind of being forced by reality to incentivize the jobs first and then monitor their behavior after. And I will say every one of them has been open and forthcoming, and if they haven't come up to the mark, which has only happened a couple of times, they've, arrangements have been made that were acceptable to everybody to back off that original figure. But that's one. The other is that, that if you had, for instance, and this was something that my board considered, was asking the people to just approve the tax until they revoked it, which would have let us write tremendous amounts of bonds based on this tax, because you can't revoke a tax once it's bonded. It has to at least pay off the bonds. Now this is why, for instance, Columbus, Mississippi, who has been our chief rival in several big projects, that one we lost because they had a 30-year tax. And that let them bond enormous sums. That's why we didn't get that systems mill in Osceola. I think we actually won. I think we got a better thing 5 years later in Big River, which is now U.S. Steel. But we just lost. They just offered a better incentive for a worse site and got the project. They won a helicopter factory with that bond money. I mean, they expended it. They expended themselves. They spent all the future revenues. But in my view, it was well spent because it insured their future. Because, you know, if a 30-year bond pays for 3 30-year factories, employing hundreds, if not thousands of people apiece, then it's done its job. But after discussion, given the difficulty that the highway tax had, passing for an indefinite period of time, my board was afraid that that might just be a bridge too far. You know, that in 10 years, I mean, if something comes up next year, or any, you know, in the foreseeable future, and it's really worth it, you know, we could still do it. That was an option we really didn't have when we didn't have all the money that it was going to take to win Big River Steel. We just had to wait till we collected the money. But with this amendment in effect, we could have bonded that money and gone ahead and had it.
And then I would want to add one more thing, and I won't say anything else, but the way this works too is that, and I didn't know about the 7.5 acre project, so besides that.
My fault. I mean, I just found out this
No, that's fine.
yesterday. But
That was an odd one because the vast majority, and I'm gonna guess 95% of the people that come and see Clif, in which Clif's working at least one, and well, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, he's working 3 at the same time. They don't call Clif, and they don't call the foundation or the county judge, they call Little Rock, and they say, this is what we have, this is what we want to do, and describe it to them. And then the Little Rock industrial development will look at the places that fit, and if ours is one of them, then they call Clif and say, so-and-so is going to come and see you, and they set up the appointment. So if we didn't have the industrial development tax, then we wouldn't have that path to get to us, and they would never come.
No, I 100% agree. And if I could just take it one step further, so after they get the idea of where, you know, where they should go and where they should visit, you know, when they get here, and maybe not with Clif, on the visit that they make on their own before they contact Clif, I think is a tremendous opportunity for us. You know, I think those are the things that we have to think about. You know, when people come here and they think, I'm going to place my business or, you know, my company, or I'm going to go back and report, you know, yes, it is where the money is, but it's also where the quality of life is as well.
Mm-hmm.
We fight that battle.
Yeah, we do. And, you know, we all know we do. And you know, and it's not like we're not winning in some places. I mean, I've got, you know, I think I'm reliably informed that that some of the early management that moved in from Columbus, Mississippi to Marion are now selling their homes and moving to Manila because they just like it there. And that's one of the hard problems we face with, say, the 2 new cores, is that most people, you know, Hickman is management largely lives on that bluff in Dyersburg, and at Yamato, a lot of them live in Jonesboro. And if you're in management of a company and they're already covied up, you can't be out here outside the covey. So at least maybe we'll get a covey of U.S. Steel people in Manila. But I agree completely that needs to be something that we pay attention to.
Guys, we have a motion on the table and moving forward a resolution of support for the renewal of the economic development tax to the full court next Tuesday night. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? This is not the end. This is the beginning. So the next step will be, next month we'll be coming and asking for an ordinance.
And I have one more.
Oh, good.
Yes, sir.
No, go ahead. I'll give you one more.
My board also recommended, we have almost depleted the funds that have been allocated for workforce development. That is a tremendous thing that the court and people do for our industries, is we pay, co-invest with them 25% of the training that their workers receive from ANC, not from any other provider. We don't pay if you're bringing in consultants from Milwaukee or New York, we don't help fund that. But if they get the training at ANC, when they do a tremendous amount of it, we fund 25%. Very often the state will fund between 25 and 50%, and the company obviously pays the balance and pays their workers while they're in training. But of all the things we do on an ongoing basis, that's the strongest thing we can do, is show that we have a continued interest and support for our people in their jobs. So my board has asked you to consider allotting another $200,000 to that workforce training fund.
And that comes out of economic development?
It does.
Okay. Does that not have to go to finance before it goes to the full court? Aren't we kind of backwards on
But
doing that?
it comes
today?
out of here first.
Right, but I mean, so we won't be able to go to, if he needs it now, we don't have
You
another
need it
finance
by
meeting.
Tuesday.
No, we'd be fine
Okay.
next year.
Yeah,
Okay. So you just need us to make a recommendation to move it to finance at this point?
Yes. I'd forgotten it. Okay.
Okay.
Also moved that
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second that we recommend, or we move $200,000, appropriate $200,000 from economic development to the workforce training to be used at ANC. All in favor? Any opposed? We'll move that to finance and get an appropriation ordinance on the April
Thank
deal,
you.
if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
What else you got?
That's it. Thank you very much.
well,
Everyone. Yes, sir.
I had something, and this came about from a conversation that we were having, what was that, the other day, down at, and it may be something for us to look at into the future. Ways to actually begin to, since we're gonna have the new courthouses, how are we gonna pay for the upkeep? Here's an idea that I got because of what came on the news. Have y'all seen what they've done in Batesville? Batesville has put up solar panels. The school district, they have turned, I think, excess over $500,000 to offset their cost. They have 1,500 solar panels. And I was thinking of some creative ways, because once we get the courthouse finished, we got to pay for the upkeep. Can we legally do something like solar paneling that we would set up in some of the land that we're on, or even with some of the companies that we got, to offset the cost, and that would be something that would pay for the upkeep of our building?
Are you talking with economic development money, or are you
Economic
talking
development,
about?
I'm just bringing it before
county
you.
money?
County money, is that something that we could do, or we could even begin to look at? It just
Honestly, I
in the
think
same
the
way.
judge has been looking at 2 or 3 different solar projects.
Yeah, and when we started the renovation project of folks' buildings, I guess I was called by, I'm gonna say 5 different organizations that would provide that.
Mhm.
And I spent a great deal of time with one of those, in which we had drawings furnished. We were going to set some solar panels just north of the property where in the Blytheville Courthouse. We was going to set a large field just south of the Sheriff's Department, and then there was one that was across from the hospital, just west of it, across from the division. And then there was also one somewhere in the vicinity of the hospital in Osceola. And given the fact that we have 3 large steel mills here, our electric rates that we pay, it really wouldn't justify going into a long-term contract. And I really wanted them. I mean, you know, it's the going thing, and
Yeah.
I mean, Arkansas, or the central part of the United States, is really not invested in them like the West and the East is. So I wanted to get on board and get there, but financially, the cost savings just wasn't there. It was really, really close to what we'd be paying without them. And then in addition to that, given the fact that technology changes so fast, and we'd have to enter into, I think it was a 30-year agreement. And to me, it just, as bad as I wanted, it just wouldn't work. But I commend you for bringing it up, and we need more of those ideas, and we need to continue to explore them.
Yeah, well, I just looked at, it was on the news. It was just what they did down in Batesville. They put them in at the high school to help offset the teacher's salaries, and they have actually given them a bonus. But what they did was real creative. The bus overhang, like over here, they put them up on top of those.
Yeah.
They put them in different places, particularly down the field, and generated enough revenue that they were able to sell some back to the grid.
Right.
So,
See, right now in Arkansas, one of your problems is, those power companies don't buy it back. They will do net metering, so that you don't pay for any, but if you overproduce, they
Yeah.
just take it.
I'm just thinking of ways
Because
to.
I've been looking into it myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, but, you know, I mean, if we were a private company, it
Yeah.
would certainly be different. The Lexicon has put in,
Mhm.
a large field out here toward Hickman.
Hmm.
And it works for them, but I'm sure that the tax advantages is helped it greatly.
Just creative ways, because we talked about what we come up when the courthouses is finished. We talked, and I think that's something that we'll have to revisit too.
I agree.
So we were talking about how we gonna keep up the
Good idea.
business and revenue, just creative ways that will pay for itself.
I mean, it would provide income, because if you did it, it would provide income in that you wouldn't be paying as much for your electricity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So, right now.
just offset your cost.
that's what I'm saying.
Everybody, I'm having to inspect some of them,
Uh-huh.
and most of them are telling me that they're not making as much as they expected.
That's something that,
Guys, next Tuesday night, Burdette, 7 p.m. Look forward to everybody being there. Judge, you've got one more thing, sir?
One more thing.
That's their new headquarters, they moved down. Yeah, so they were trying to rent a
Yes.
but they moved, they built a new building and moved out there. They needed more space. No, it is beautiful, it is
My first COVID shot yesterday, my arm was
first one,
Solar panels.
which one you get?
Someone the second one,
What you get? What shot you get?
I'm not really even sure. I think it was the Ravona. I got a
Who'd you get it
text,
from?
John Rose. I got a text yesterday that said, we've got one shot left if you can be here in 30 minutes, and I dropped everything and signed into the door.
Well, they did, Rose, I did the Moderna.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That was where John
First
Rose.
one was cool.
Yeah, my arm is just sore.
The
This.
arm was for the second one.
I've been speaking with,
Man, the second one.
Yeah.
Second
So
one
it's,
was rough.
it's a good,
Somebody
but he has time to.
tired.
I've been speaking with some of you about, some of the different projects that we've taken on in the judge's office, and Stephen is heading this one up. And I don't think everybody might not have heard this the other day, but in 2000, and this has to do with transparency and communicating what we do with the public. When we first took office, Stephen and I looked at some of the areas that we felt we were short in, and transparency was one of them. And prior to us coming in, Mississippi County was ranked, I think, 67th in transparency. Is that correct, Stephen?
Overall,
Overall.
54.
54 overall. We moved from there. In 19, we made some improvements. In 20, we made a great deal of improvements. In political transparency, we're tied for third place, and the only two ahead of us is Benton and Washington County. I told Stephen right the first month we was here, I wanted to be at number one. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Doesn't cost a lot of effort. There's no reason why Mississippi County couldn't be number one in transparency. These are just two items that I'm asking you to ordinance to pass. One of them has to do with county board transparencies, and that's this one right here, which has, this particular one has given me quite a bit of trouble. We need to tighten up some of those boards as far as information goes, and finding out when those board members roll off, and putting it out to the public that there's a position open in case somebody wants it. Some of these boards that we have do a really, really good job at that, and some don't. This is by This particular one came from Faulkner County, which Faulkner County, there's an article I attached to that too. They came way up in the last 2 years. The second one is an ordinance that that would require us to put the bidding process online. And I mean, granted, I could do that right now without an ordinance, but I think an ordinance tightens it up to where it will certainly take effect quickly, and it'll continue after I'm gone and after y'all are gone, and we can, and we're replaced by other members, and we can continue this. And I'll continue to bring some of these ordinances to you in the future as we're able to take them on. Right now, Stephen has utilized most all of the website capacity that we have. We're not moving just really fast at replacing that because there's other factors that lie in it. When you get a new website, in our case, there's likely that it would change all of our email addresses. So I'm trying to get all the information I can before we do something as big as changing websites. But I think this is important in this day and age of public not trusting elected officials, and in some cases rightly so. I think the more that we can get out there, the easier our job will be, and the happier the public will be.
These, you just pointing out on the one on the boards and stuff, that's not the same list that we'd have. We'd have.
No, that's right. This is
Just
theirs.
an
We'd
example.
have to modify it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got different boards.
We've got drainage district boards
Yeah.
and
Hospital board.
county road boards.
Yeah. Yeah. Looks good.
I think it's important.
I
So,
think it is too. Is there anything you want us to act on, Judge, or you just want to pass?
yeah, I would
it
like to have it voted on and then move to the full court for adoption.
That we, tell us exactly how you'd like.
I'd like to, well, in the case that you talked about on the county board, we would just replace these boards with the ones that we currently have. And that list is in the, it's in the county clerk's office. And then we would have to go to each one of those boards and then obtain this other information.
Guys, discussion, thoughts?
No, I think it's I had a conversation with Stephen the other day pertaining to the website, and also related to this. Say we pass this and this becomes the availability, and would this help to increase the ease of using something to a new system when we go to it?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty much transparency. I'm all for transparency.
Let's take them one at a time. So
Okay.
do I have a resolution regarding the ordinance, the example ordinance that the judge has given us on the boards and the release of information or the posting of the information regarding our county boards?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And guys, if y'all have some opposition to this or folks in favor, that's fine too. We've got a second one here, the proposed ordinance the judge mentioned here, just on the transparency issues on the bidding information. Judge, are you prepared to move forward on this one also?
Absolutely. And like I said, I'll have more for you in the future.
Okay. Any discussion?
Will the ordinance, I guess, is it gonna name somewhere in the ordinance who is responsible for doing that? I mean, is that,
I thought about that, but I don't think so. I thought.
that'll just be at your discretion as time goes, right?
That's right.
Falls under the county judge's office,
Okay.
whether he's there or
And you will declare
10
someone
years down the
permanently responsible for doing that, right? Got you. I mean, I don't see any reason not to at least take it to the full court, so I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion?
And I'll say this, Sebastian County has one very similar to this, and I looked it up this morning, they passed it in 2004. So we've got to catch up.
We're a little behind the game.
All in favor? Any opposed? You got them, Judge.
Thank you.
You got anything else, son?
Nope, that's it.
Anybody else on the court? Peggy, you got anything else, ma'am? Cliff?
No, thank y'all very much.
Guys, look forward to seeing y'all Tuesday night. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.